All right, so I broke this up into a first half and second half part. Investors are also looking at this as risk. Okay, what's the technology risk? Can your team that you've put together actually deliver on the promise? Also, can you actually go make a sale? That's a very important and underappreciated feature in a startup. So you've got, technology risk, you've got financial risk, um, you've got management risk. I always tell this one startup that I actually did some work for really early on in my career, but I don't really count them, is while things were not working out well, they had a co-founder who went, emptied the bank account, and took the money and disappeared. So, there's lots of risk out there. Management risk. Can they, put together the necessary team to do it? Co-founder risk. Can they, the co-founders not get mad at each other and tell each other to F off? Okay. And, like I always say, you're competing with other investments. It's really hard to compete right now on a high risk investment in software when U.S. federal treasuries are paying, 5.5% return, and that's a guaranteed return. So be aware of that. Okay, you're competing against other investments. How are VC firms paid? Kind of how do they work on the numbers? So they're typically paid on, 2 and 20. They get 2% of the money that you put in, and they get 20% of the return. So a VC firm creates $100 million fund, they get 2% of that. So they get $2 million of that up front. All right. They then and go dish out the other 98 million, but that's not guaranteed. So they've really got to pay for their expenses out of the $2 million. Okay. Then let's say they invest $10 million in somebody, and a number of years later they get $100 million out. All right, so they're getting 20% of that $100 million. All right, so that's a good win for them. All right, but you also got to understand VC firms, they're competing with other investments. They're competing with stock markets. They're competing with Coca-Cola and its dividends. They're competing with Berkshire Hathaway. Yeah, they're competing with Microsoft stock. They're competing with insurance companies. So they're competing with these other investments. Then also understand VC firms are looking at this from a labor standpoint. So you've got general partners at VC firms who they're the ones who are kind of in control of investments. And so they're looking for any one investment to basically return the fund. Okay. So I make a $5 million investment out of my $100 million fund into your company. They'd like to see a 20x return. They want to see $100 million come back out. Reason for that, venture is just not a scalable enterprise. So understand that there's a lot of, it's a very human interaction environment. Okay. So not very scalable. What are investors thinking about? They're thinking about you from a growth standpoint. Can you find a strategic strategic buyer who wants to purchase you? Okay. They're looking at their returns. They're looking at their fund size. So, somebody who's got a $20 million fund is going to invest into a certain set of company startups, and somebody who's got a $100 million fund or a $500 million fund is going to invest in a completely different set of companies and startups, and they're going to invest them at different points in the process. Okay, so understand who are you talking to, and what's their fund size, and how are they trying to go forward. Okay, so you're going to want to choose a appropriately sized firm. If you go to somewhere, I mean, you may potentially go somewhere and say, I'm looking for $2 million, and they're saying, well, we invest at, our average investment is 17.5. You're probably going to be mismatched there. Understand those things. Know this before you go in there. Choose appropriate sized firms and investors to pitch to if you get that far. Also understand you may not get all your money all at once. If somebody's going to put in 15 million, you may get 5 million today. You may get 5 million in 3 or 4 years after you meet certain criteria, and then you may get 5 million later when you've met additional criteria. Now, one other thing about investors, they like to keep some dry powder around towards the end of their funds for companies that need it. Okay. So there may be additional follow-on money as well if you've met criteria and you've met growth and all that. Final a thing to think about before the investor meeting. Even if this is for seed money, even if this is for 150,000, you really need to have something that works. It doesn't have to be great. There's so many resources out there that are free or cheap. If you are a software technology startup and you don't have something working, if you don't get laughed out of that investment meeting, you should be. Okay. Have something working. There's so many resources out there that are free or cheap. This probably doesn't work for like biotech. If you're building a neighborhood nuclear reactor, you're not going to have something working. But if you're a software startup and you don't have something working, the joke's on you. Okay. You've got to have talked to customers. You've got to have some kind of commitments. Another thing is no NDAs. Okay. Investors aren't going to sign NDAs. Once again, the joke's going to be on you if you ask for that. Investors are in the business of investing in innovation. They are not in the business of stealing your ideas. So understand that. Please no NDAs. I've actually been asked for one. I was like, excuse me, what? Now it came in from a different angle, but still, no NDAs, folks. Don't look bad. Okay. Anyway, hopefully some of this was helpful about the investor, and we can talk later on that. Hopefully you'll hang around for my next episode as well. Thanks.